Hi, Ben here, and we're down in the craft lab, and today we wanted to talk to you about spoons and actually the finer nuances of putting embellishment onto your spoons when you finish making it. Certainly for me, once you finish that overall shape, letting it dry out and then coming back to putting a bit of personalisation on there really makes it stand out and gives it its own unique style to your own maker's style really. So what I wanted to do is show you 3 different techniques that we use and some of the different tools that you can use for doing that to basically make your spoons stand out from the crowd and make them absolutely personal to you. So one of the things that I like to do to make the spoons just a little bit more decorative is sometimes not actually do much carving on the actual handle itself, but I like to put these little finials on the very end, so you're almost using the sort of tool itself to leave these textured tool marks on it, and obviously put this nice little decorative end on there. And then obviously that just sort of shows your skill as a maker. Then it just allows it to show all those different tool marks. The only thing that I have tended to put on all my spoons is just carve my little bee in there, and that's just a very simple sort of carving technique which we'll show you how to do as well. On some spoons you might find that you don't actually have to do anything at all, just the grain itself is the thing that is the decoration. So this is a nice bit of cherry, and it's still got a little bit of that cleaving mark on there, so you can actually see that knot running all the way through it. Another technique that you can use is a simple technique which is called kolrosing, which is a sort of form of sort of scrimshaw really. So you put a very small channel into your handle of your spoon, and then you can then sort of put a pigment in there to actually emphasize those sort of lines that you've carved into the grain. So traditionally you would have used a sort of charcoal of sort of roots, so older root was often used. Some people use instant coffee, some people use dyes. You can even use the lead from your pencil if you like to. And obviously once it's in that groove you can then oil it, and then that will seal it in place, and obviously it kind of emphasizes those tool marks again, especially if you're working on a light timber like a bit of cherry or birch. It really shows up nicely. And then I've also got one that I've spent a little bit more time laying out a nice design on there that actually sort of almost emphasizes the shape of the spoon itself. So yeah, using different tools to actually remove a thin channel of timber from there. This hasn't got any pigment in there, this is just purely the tool marks again, sort of showing that sort of decorative line. And then I've got one spoon in my collection which is my sort of prized one. This really goes to show a sort of hybrid of the 2 techniques really. So you've got a little bit of sort of chip carving going on in there, and also that sort of decorative carving that's got the lines sort of removed from the actual edge of the spoon. And this was carved by a very famous spoon carver, sadly no longer with us. This is a guy called Willy Skundsvist, a Swedish spoon carver that his famous Swedish carving techniques was the thing that got us all into spoon carving really. So this is one of his that I got from him many years ago, and that's my sort of prize spoon in my collection. So some of the tools that I like to use for obviously that decoration is, obviously you can, if you're very confident, use your larger sloyd knives that you've crafted the rest of the spoon with, but you have to be a bit more careful obviously if you're going to be doing decorative work, whether you're using the tip for the engraving or whether you're using it for that fine carving. You might find that the slightly longer blade actually gets in the way and is a little bit sort of dangerous. So normally at that stage when I get to the decoration is I'll swap over to a much smaller knife. So I will often use my big pick knife. This has only got like 1.5 inch blade, but obviously because it's very narrow it means it's very easy for getting those detailed cuts into the ends of spoons and things like that. So that's a great choice, and that you can again strangle up and you can just use the tip for that fine engraving work. My absolute preferred tool for that kind of decoration though is one of our little antler engravers, purely because it's so stumpy. You can hold it in this sort of 4-finger grip and it gives you so much control that you're not going to slip, and you can really control those cuts, especially if you're working with grain direction as well. You can actually use your thumb on the back side of the actual blade to prevent the blade from travelling too far and sort of damaging your spoon or wrecking the pattern that you're carving in. So a little antler engraver is absolutely ideal for all those decorative cuts. So I think it's about that time where we're going to put a little bit of decoration on this spoon. This has actually been carved a few days ago, and it's actually already dried out. And I normally do the sort of decoration side when it has actually dried. You'll get much cleaner cuts and crisper cuts, and you'll probably find that it will be less likely to break out from the grain as well. So when it comes to decoration, I always end up spending just a little bit of time, especially if you're new to it, marking it out with a pencil. So we'll just mark a simple little pattern that I always tend to put on the ends of the spoon. So just a little decorative little finial. So just mark it out. Obviously it helps sometimes if you draw a centre line, but we can just roughly sketch this on like so. And normally I would look at the grain of your spoon as well. So obviously we've got this bit of a knot here, so don't try and do anything too complicated around this, because you'll find that the grain direction will really mess you about. But then first of all, I'm going to go in there with a nice fine detailed knife, nothing too big. And what I want to do first is I'm going to actually try and sort of start to put some stop cuts in. You could use a little fine bladed saw if you wanted to, but I find that just using a sharp knife like so, cutting into the grain, so that I can then start to split back and remove some of that material. But once I've got that little stop cut in there, and you notice that what I'm doing is I'm using my forefinger on the back edge of the knife to help push that blade into the wood, but also locking this thumb, so I'm sort of almost closing this fist up to try and sort of push that blade through the fibres. And now that I've got that stop cut in there, I can start to work back into that stop cut. And you'll notice that because I've put that little stop cut in there, it will prevent the cut from travelling too far along that grain. And then we can start to come back again, the opposite direction. And we're just going to progressively do that back and forth, taking our time, just working towards that pencil line. Just like so. Now what you can do, if you're finding that that's a little bit tricky, obviously you won't see where I'm working, but I can flip it over and you can actually use the thumb of your opposing hand. So the hand that's actually holding the spoon, I can actually put that thumb pretty much behind where I want to work, and then that allows me to put pressure from that thumb onto the back edge of the knife, which will slowly controlled push that blade through the fibres and also control the direction of cut as well. So you can see that we're getting that nice progressive cut all the way down to where we've put that little stop cut in. And then we can turn it around and we can come back the other way, put another little notch in there, and then flip it back again and come that way. So whenever you're working wood, you've got to think about the grain direction. So we always want to work what we call from the high point to the low point. Obviously I don't want to try and work back up that slope, because you will be cutting up grain and it will just get a real raggedy cut and potentially could split your spoon. So we always want to work from the high point to the low point. And this is a bit of willow, and now that it's dried out, it's almost like carving very hard wax, I suppose, really. It's got real nice sort of positive feel to it, but it's not super duper tough. It's not too hard to actually do it, and you get this real nice polished sort of cut to it as well. Nice sharp tools, and then nice sort of a bit of wood, and you get this really nice smooth finish to it. So we've spent a little bit of time doing that little decorative little finial on the end of the spoon. So you can spend as much time as you want on that, refining that and working it into exactly how you want it. But what I'll show you now is how to do a little bit of chip carving. And I normally end up putting my maker's mark on the back of the spoon. And I try and keep my letter B for my name. Obviously I try and keep it a little bit stylized. Doing complete curves on any kind of lettering is very tricky when you're learning, so I try and keep it relatively sort of angular. But we're going to show you the chip carving technique that we use, and we're going to use one of our little antler engravers. And the great thing about that is you can, again, strangle it up close, and we're going to use that very controlled cut. And because we're working in with those curves, like I say, it's very difficult when you're learning to try and do a complete rotation. So using this, I can actually apply pressure again with my thumb, but when it comes to the ends of the cuts, I can actually use the thumb to stop the blade from travelling too far as well. So it's a little bit tricky. You have to work with the grain direction again, And normally what I do, once I've marked it out, is I'll lay it on a workbench or on a table, hold my little antler engraver, and then what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to use the very sharp tip of the, almost like the skew chisel blade to it, and I'm going to cut straight into the fibres first of all. So directly down, holding the blade absolutely 90 degrees to the wood, and that's probably cut in maybe a millimetre, something like that. And then what I'm going to do then is I'm now going to angular the blade slightly, and I'm basically coming maybe half a mil to the side, but I'm aiming the tip of that knife to where I've previously cut. So I'm almost imagining got a straight line down. Now I'm going to be angling at about 45 degrees, and I'm going to come from the side, and I'm just going to work down that line. And obviously if we've hit the mark, you can start to see we're starting to remove that little channel of wood, and that's a good sign. So we've gone one side, then what I'll do is I'll turn it round, and now I'm going to do exactly the same, but this time I'm angling it again 45 degrees, but from the opposite side of the cut. So a little bit tricksy to hold it and see, especially with this nice sunlight coming in. But we're going to aim to the bottom of that hole, get to the end of our cut, and if we've hit the marks, what we can use then is the tip of this tool, and we're just going to cut in vertically from both sides. And what this should do is sever those fibres. And look, that's a perfect example. If you've hit the marks, if you've hit the bottom of that channel and you've obviously severed the fibres top and bottom, it should come out as one complete little V of wood. So that's our little chunk of spoon that we've removed, and we've left this nice decorative little V channel in there. And that's pretty much as good as it could be, really. Obviously, if you don't quite hit that mark initially, you can go again until you hit that mark, and it should come out. If you're having trouble, or if you're working with wood that's got quite a sort of convoluted grain, sometimes what you might have to do is do a few more of those vertical cuts to help sever the fibres. So there you go, we've used that simple technique just to carve in our little maker's mark. So obviously we could spend a little bit more time just cleaning up the very sort of recesses of those little channels that we've cut in. But if you're working on a light timber like birch or willow like this one, when you actually oil it and a little bit of dirt from your fingers sort of comes out into those grooves, it will really bring out that sort of carving as well and make it look really good. The other technique that you can use for any little chip carving knife that you've got with this very pronounced sort of triangular blade shape is you can use this chip carving technique like we've got on Village spoon, where they tend to use the very tip of the tool itself to create these little triangular cuts, and it's absolutely perfect for making these sort of little starburst sort of style of chip carving. It does take a little bit of practice, so before you do it on your best spoon carving project, it's worth getting a scrap piece of timber and you can have a little practice. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the very sort of tip of this triangular shaped blade, and what we're going to do is we're going to sort of do 3 cuts all going in at about 45 degrees, all aiming towards the same central point. So we're going to push in like so, and then we're going to turn it, and we're going to push in again, and then we're going to turn it, and we're going to do like basically creating a triangle. And if you get it right, you see we create this little triangular divot basically, and you can then make that deeper and bigger by just continuing and making another pass and another pass, and basically just keep working like that. But it is very effective, and obviously if you put them in a sequence of cuts, you'll end up with these really nice little triangles, especially if you're going around a circle like Willie has done on this one. It just looks really, really smart, I think. So another technique that you can use is a technique that some people call kolrosing. It is effectively like scrimshaw, but for wooden ware. So scrimshaw and kolrosing is basically the technique of cutting into the fibres vertically, just feathering the fibres, and then you actually use a pigment to actually make those stand out. So a great little option if you've got a small little utility blade. Like I really like doing this with a field knife, because obviously that curve just sits perfectly into your grasp again. And again, you can mark it out if you want to, or you can go freestyle. And all we're going to do is we're going to apply pressure, and we're just going to push really quite hard into those fibres, sort of feathering those fibres themselves. And you can go quite deep with this, as long as your spoon's not too small. Just make sure that you've got a nice little groove into those fibres. And then what we're going to do is we're going to make those stand out by using what we have to hand. So like I say, traditionally they'd have used maybe like a charcoal from some older root or something like that. But everybody seems to have instant coffee to hand these days. So a little bit of instant coffee sprinkled into there. One, it looks good, but two, it also smells really good as well. So if you put that in the groove, and then obviously you use a straight knife just to clean off the outer edges, you can see it really starts to accentuate that little groove. Now obviously at this stage it's likely to come out again, but if you oil the whole spoon, then it will trap all that pigment into that recess and obviously keep it there, and it's just going to make it look really good. Now the kolrosing itself gets very complicated with lots of intersecting lines, so even though this looks a simple technique, you can spend hours decorating your spoon. So that's a few of the techniques that we use for embellishing our spoons. Obviously there's a lot of other different techniques, especially when you travel around the world. There's lots of different regional techniques and things like that. But that's just the simple techniques that we use with a few of our little carving tools. So hope you enjoy seeing what we've been working on in the workshop. We're hoping to do a few more sort of craft videos. We've even got this idea that we maybe even do like a live spoon carving sort of stream, so it'll be almost be like a live spoon club. But yeah, hope you enjoyed seeing that. And obviously if you've got other techniques that you'd like to see, or other favourite carving techniques that you guys have got, then let us know, because it's always nice to share all those techniques with each other. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next time.